From the moment she stepped into my apartment, I knew something wasn't going to be normal about living with an alien. But I didn't expect the first real problem to begin at 3 in the morning. It started with a quiet knock on my bedroom door, soft enough that I almost slept through it almost. When I opened my eyes, the room was pitch dark. The heater had clicked off again, and the only sound was the steady hum of the city lights outside. I thought maybe I had imagined the knock until I heard it again. A nervous, very controlled, very deliberate tap. Not the kind you make when you're confident. The kind you make when you're scared. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, trying to remember the orientation briefing she'd given me earlier. Her species didn't get cold, didn't need much sleep, didn't like surprises. So why was she at my door in the middle of the night? I swung my legs out of bed and opened it. And there she stood, rigid as a statue, her bioluminescent markings dim and flickering, like she was trying not to show how unsettled she was. She didn't say a word at first. She just stared at me with those bright, reflective eyes that always seemed too calm, too wise, and tonight slightly frightened. "Is something wrong?" I whispered. She took a long breath as if preparing to say something serious, something she didn't want to say. But then she finally spoke, her voice a quiet tremor. "We have an issue. Your world grows unpredictable at night. The temperature falls, the shadows move, and I cannot rest alone. My instincts warn me." She stepped closer, lowering her head slightly. "Where I am from, it is customary for safety for roommates to sleep in the same resting space." The words didn't register at first. I blinked. "You mean?" "Yes," she said, completely serious. "We must share the bed. No hesitation, no humor. Just the steady, matter-of-fact declaration of someone who believed this was the obvious solution to some kind of invisible danger only she could sense." She even added, as if it were the most logical thing in the universe, "It is a galactic custom." That was when I realized something was definitely off. She wasn't just asking because she wanted company. Something had actually alarmed her. Her species didn't show fear easily. She'd told me that earlier with pride. So the fact that she was at my door now, trembling slightly, meant there was something she wasn't telling me. I glanced past her into the hallway, suddenly aware of every creak in the old apartment. Every gust of wind against the windows, every shadow that seemed to stretch a little too far. "What exactly did you hear?" I whispered. She swallowed hard before answering. "Not here," she said. "Feel." That was the moment I knew the night was about to get a lot more complicated. Before we go on, if you enjoy these suspenseful HFY stories with humor, mystery, and big reveals, remember to like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Her markings brightened again, but only for a second. Whatever she sensed, it was still out there, and now I wasn't sure I wanted to sleep alone either. Her answer stayed with me longer than the darkness did. "Feel," she had said, and the word hung between us like a cold draft from somewhere a window shouldn't be open. I stepped back to let her inside, and she hesitated for only a second before crossing into my room, her eyes sweeping over the walls as if scanning for threats I couldn't see. She walked slowly, measuring every footstep, until she stood beside my bed. Only then did she release a small, quiet breath, the kind someone lets out when they're trying not to show relief. "What exactly did you feel?" I asked again, trying to sound calm. She tilted her head. "A disturbance. A ripple in the energy of your dwelling." Her markings flickered, faint but rhythmic. "There is something moving through the structure. Something that does not belong." I stared at her, half expecting her to say she was joking, but she maintained the same solemn expression she always used when discussing her species' instincts. I walked toward the wall and knocked gently against it, listening for pipes or a heater cycling on, but she shook her head. "No, not mechanical. Organic." A chill climbed up my spine. I wasn't sure if it was the fear she was radiating or just the cold in the room, but suddenly the shadows felt heavier. "So your solution is to share my bed?" I asked, trying to make sense of the logic. "It is standard precaution," she replied. "In my culture, when danger is possible but unclear, individuals rest in close proximity. It allows for synchronized awareness. It reduces vulnerability." She paused as though searching for the right translation. "Sleeping apart, in such conditions, is considered reckless." I couldn't help a small laugh at that, even though the situation didn't feel funny. "Well, humans don't usually share beds with roommates." She blinked, genuinely surprised. "Why not? You are both fragile and easily startled. Collective resting should be common practice." I rubbed my forehead, unsure how to explain the thousands of years of human social rules she had just trampled through. "It's just different for us." She studied me for a long moment, then took a slow breath, her posture softening. "You fear impropriety." The fact that she said it so flatly made me sputter. "No, well maybe, but that's not the point." "It is the point," she said calmly. "You think I am requesting unnecessary closeness. I assure you I am not. I am following survival protocol." Then her gaze shifted ever so slightly, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty in it. "Unless," she paused, "unless you believe I misread the danger." There it was. Not fear of shadows. Fear of being wrong. Fear of misunderstanding something essential about my world. Her species prided themselves on their intuitive senses, on reading the environment the way humans read facial expressions. If she sensed something, it wasn't random. "No," I said, softer than I expected. "You're not imagining it. This building makes weird noises all night. And I guess if something scared you enough to come here, then we handle it together." Her shoulders relaxed, only slightly, but enough to notice. She looked around the room again, then sat carefully at the edge of the bed, her movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. "Then we will perform the observation protocol," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Observation protocol?" "Yes. We rest in parallel alignment, and if my senses detect a shift, I alert you immediately." She nodded once. "It is a simple system. In theory, maybe." But my brain kept circling back to one detail. She still hadn't explained what the organic presence in the building was supposed to be. My heart thumped a little harder as I sat on the other side of the bed. "Before we start this protocol," I said slowly, "can you at least tell me what this thing might be?" She considered it carefully, then answered in the calmest tone imaginable. "Possibilities range from harmless to highly concerning. That is not comforting." "It is accurate," she replied. A faint rumble echoed through the wall behind us. She froze. I froze. The lights flickered for just a second, hardly noticeable unless you were already on edge. She turned to me with steady seriousness. "It is closer now." And just like that, my night officially became the most complicated one of my life. She didn't move after saying it was closer, and for a long moment neither did I. We just sat there on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall as if waiting for it to breathe or shift, or give us some clue that she was right. The strange part was that the longer I listened, the more the entire apartment seemed to settle into its own kind of uneasy silence, like it was holding its breath along with us. Even the hum of the city outside felt lighter, thinner, as if the whole world had stepped back. I looked at her again and saw that her markings, those faint lines of soft light that usually glowed steady and calm, were flickering in a strange rhythm that didn't look accidental. She was sensing something, that much was clear, and she was trying not to show how deeply it shook her. I lowered my voice and asked what exactly she meant by closer, and she answered without turning her head. "It is now within this unit's walls," she said, and the words hit harder than the cold air creeping around the room. I swallowed the urge to ask if she was absolutely sure, because she had already explained that her instincts were reliable, maybe more reliable than most technology her people used. She had once said her species could sense atmospheric changes, trace vibrations, faint biological energy patterns, things humans didn't even register. So if she said something alive was moving through the structure, she wasn't guessing. I stood up slowly and pressed my hand to the wall, half expecting to feel something crawling on the other side, but the surface stayed still. Her eyes tracked me carefully, as if she wasn't sure whether I was bold, foolish, or simply human. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and soft. "You should remain sitting. Movement may draw it." That warning froze me in place, because her tone was not dramatic or emotional. It was simply factual, like someone reciting instructions from a safety manual. I eased back down beside her, trying to keep my breathing steady, though my heart wasn't cooperating. She drew in a slow breath, the kind someone uses when they are trying to calm their own nerves without admitting they need calming. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. "I misjudged earlier. I claimed the custom was only for shared awareness and synchronized safety. But there is more." I turned toward her, trying to read her face, even though her expressions were always subtle. "More like what?" She hesitated, as if choosing between several answers, and finally continued in a voice so low I had to lean slightly closer to hear. "My species does not fear often. When we do, we are trained to mask it. Showing fear signals vulnerability. But tonight I am not masking it well. I am aware." Her markings dimmed. "I do not wish to misinterpret your world. I do not wish to misread danger. And I do not wish to be alone with uncertainty." There was something raw in her voice that caught me off guard. It wasn't dramatic or trembling, but it held that quiet, honest strain of someone who had always been strong and suddenly found herself unsure. I told her she wasn't alone, not tonight, and not as long as she was living here. She blinked at that slowly, and something in her posture softened by a fraction, almost like she believed me, but wasn't sure she should. Before either of us could say more, a soft creak moved along the floorboards outside the bedroom, long and low, the kind of sound that shouldn't happen unless someone, or something, was shifting their weight. She turned her head toward the door instantly, her pupils widening, her back going rigid. "It is inside," she whispered. I felt my skin prickle with the kind of cold that didn't come from temperature. I scanned the room for anything I could use as a tool or weapon, but there was nothing except a lamp, a stack of books, and an alarm clock that hadn't worked properly since I moved in. Another creak followed, this one smaller, like a careful step. She rose from the bed with that controlled grace her species had, quiet but precise, moving toward the door without making a sound. I grabbed her arm gently, whispering that she shouldn't go out there alone. She paused, then nodded, understanding that humans didn't like the idea of facing dark hallways filled with unknown noises by themselves. Instead, she lowered herself closer to the floor, placing her palm against the wood, her markings glowing faintly as she focused. After several tense seconds, she spoke again. "It is not large," she said, "but it is curious. It moves with intention. Slow, purposeful." Purposeful was not comforting. Curious wasn't much better. I whispered a nervous joke about wishing her instincts came with a species manual, or maybe a volume control, so the danger didn't sound quite so absolute, and she blinked once in what might have been her version of amusement. But then her expression shifted again, becoming serious and alert. "It is approaching this door," she said. "We must be prepared." I wasn't prepared for anything, but she placed herself between me and the door, as if that were the only logical position for her to take. I tried to protest, but she shook her head once. "My senses give me advantage. You remain behind." The moment stretched tight as the air in the room grew heavy, and then the doorknob twitched. Just once. A tiny movement, like something brushed it accidentally. But she reacted instantly, standing tall, her markings brightening in a warning glow I hadn't seen before. "Stay still," she whispered. Another sound followed, a faint scrape at the bottom edge of the door. My throat tightened. She leaned in, listening, and her eyes widened by the smallest fraction. It knows we are aware. I didn't want to ask how she knew that. I didn't want to ask what happened next. But she answered anyway. We wait, she said, her voice firm. We watch. And we do not show fear. Easier said than done. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in my ears. She took a slow breath and positioned herself in a stance that looked calm, but ready, like she was prepared for anything that door might reveal. And then, just when the silence became unbearable, the floorboards outside gave one more creak, closer than any of the others. Too close, she whispered one final warning. It is right outside. The sound outside the door didn't fade this time. It settled there, as if whatever had been moving through the apartment all night had finally reached its destination and was now deciding what to do next. My roommate stood completely still, her posture a perfect mix of alert and calm, but I could see the faint tremor in the soft glow of her markings. They pulsed like a heartbeat, brighter than before, as though her instincts were shifting into a higher state of focus. I tried not to breathe too loudly. She tried not to breathe at all. The silence grew heavier, thick enough to feel. Another scrape whispered under the doorframe, softer than the last, but somehow sharper too, like claws. Or something that wanted to sound like claws. My mind flooded with possibilities, none of them encouraging. She leaned close to the door, not touching it but listening in a way humans couldn't. Her head tilted slightly, her eyes narrowing, and finally she murmured, "It is attempting to understand us." That statement didn't relax me one bit. I whispered back, asking if she could identify what species it was, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she pressed her palm to the air a few inches from the wood, her markings flickering in quick, focused patterns. After several seconds, she spoke again. It has mass similar to a small animal, but its movement is too slow for a typical Earth creature. And its energy pattern is unusual. My imagination did not need the help. I was already picturing everything from mutated raccoons to escaped lab experiments to something that slipped through a crack in reality just to steal my leftover pizza. The doorknob twitched again, this time harder, and I felt my entire body tense. She stepped forward, raising her hand just slightly, not in aggression but in readiness, like she was preparing a defensive instinct I didn't want to see tested. Then she spoke softly but firmly. "If it enters, remain behind me." Normally I would have argued, but at that moment I was not interested in challenging alien instincts that had kept her alive across multiple star systems. Another scrape, another slow creak, and then silence. Except not true silence. There was a subtle presence on the other side of the door, the sense of something listening, breathing, waiting. She tightened her posture. "It is making a decision," she whispered. I wanted to ask what decision, but before I could get the words out, the door began to move. Not much, just a tiny shift inward. No more than the thickness of a coin, but enough to make the hinges sigh. She flared with bright light and stepped forward, making a low sound from deep in her throat. Something like a warning frequency. The movement stopped immediately. The presence froze. She lowered her arm but didn't relax. "It understands that we are aware," she said again, her voice quiet but intense. "It is reassessing risk. Risk." The word bounced around my mind with unpleasant speed. She slowly backed away from the door, her eyes never leaving it, and motioned for me to do the same. I slipped back, keeping my steps as soft as possible. The floorboards groaned beneath me despite my best efforts, and the moment they did, the presence outside shifted again. One step, maybe two, she stiffened. "It is retreating." And she was right. The next creak moved farther from the door, then another, slow and hesitant, but definitely moving away. We didn't speak. We just waited, each breath a countdown. Eventually the steps faded down the hallway, softer and softer, until they disappeared completely. The building seemed to relax with us. The lights steadied. The air warmed. Even the ever-present city noise seemed to seep back into the room, like it had been hiding outside waiting for the danger to pass. After a long minute she exhaled, lowering her shoulders as if letting go of a weight she had been holding too tightly. I asked if it was gone, and she nodded slowly. "For now," she said. It did not wish confrontation. It was merely curious. Perhaps lost. Lost was not the description I expected, but it was better than hostile. I asked what she thought it actually was, and she hesitated before answering. There are many small species in the galaxy that wander through unfamiliar structures when seeking refuge or warmth. Some are harmless. Some are simply confused. Its energy was faint. Young, possibly displaced. She paused and added, "It did not behave like a predator." I felt my heart finally settle back into a normal rhythm. "So we're safe?" I asked. She nodded again, more confidently this time. "Yes, but uncertainty remains. We must stay aware." She stepped back toward the bed then, her posture shifting from defensive to exhausted in a single slow breath. I realized just how much the night had drained her, how much her instincts had been working non-stop, how much she hated not being certain in a world she didn't fully understand yet. I sat beside her carefully and thanked her for protecting us, even though I wasn't entirely sure what we had been protected from. She looked at me with a steady, almost puzzled expression, like she didn't expect gratitude. "It is my responsibility," she said simply. "We share a dwelling. We share risk." There was something sincere in that, something steady and rooted in the way her culture seemed to treat community and safety. It wasn't about fear. It was about connection, responsibility through proximity. After a moment she added, "And I misheard you earlier. The custom is not merely about synchronized awareness. It also addresses emotional stability." Mine was unsettled. I blinked. "Wet, you were scared." She held the pause for several seconds before nodding once. Fear is logical when facing the unknown, but I did not wish to reveal weakness. That admission struck deeper than I expected. She wasn't emotionless. She wasn't unshakable. She was something more familiar than I had realized. Someone far from home, trying to understand a strange world while pretending she had everything under control. I told her I didn't see her as weak. That fear didn't make her lesser. That she handled the night better than most humans would. She listened carefully, her expression softening in that subtle way her species communicated trust. "Your words improve my stability," she said. "Perhaps this is why shared resting practices developed, not only for survival, but for reassurance." I nodded. "Makes sense." Then I hesitated before adding, "Do you still need to share the bed tonight?" She glanced toward the door, her markings glowing faintly in a calmer tone now. "Yes," she said simply, "until daylight returns. Then the building's patterns reset. Instability fades. We settled onto opposite sides of the bed, not touching, not speaking for a while, just listening to the building breathe again. The danger had passed, whatever it was. But the night had changed something. I could feel it in the quiet, in the way she finally relaxed, in the way she trusted me enough to show that she wasn't fearless after all. And as her markings dimmed into gentle, steady light, she whispered one last thought, before sleep finally found her. "Tonight has taught me something important about humans," she said softly. "You face danger with confusion, but also with courage. I respect that." And before I could reply, her breathing steadied, her posture eased, and the long, strange night finally ended with both of us still awake, but somehow less afraid. Not because the unknown was gone, but because we were facing it together.